Hello and welcome to this session today at Adobe DITA World with the title Content Optimization with Congree in Adobe AEM. And before we start, some information about myself. My name is Mannhardt, and at Congree I run the international business activities. I also sign as president of our US subsidiary, and I'm dealing with international partners, for instance, like Adobe. So when we are getting asked to describe what we do with Congree, the best way to describe Congree is to say we help companies to create better content. And how we do that? We do that with our software platform, which is the Congree Authoring Server. And with that, we provide feedback to content creators about content quality, right? Where they write content, for instance, in editing environments like Adobe FrameMaker, Adobe InDesign, or in Adobe AEM. And all this is supported by what we call linguistic intelligence. So what we do, we incorporate, for instance, style guides from companies and also company-specific terminology. And we also provide existing content for reuse within the actual content creation process. And we provide also help for content optimization to the authors during the content creation process. Some information about Congree as a company. Congree had been founded 12 years ago in the year 2010, but the history of our technology goes a bit back. We have a background from a German science research institute, and at this institute already 30 years ago, the basic development of our core technology had been developed to support companies with a software platform that supports writers, authors to create better content and to optimize content. And the first customers had been in the German automotive sector, and following that we had a very nice growth story over the years in the German-speaking countries. And so 2020, it was the start also to go towards international markets. And so we started mainly in the US and Canadian market, which also had been quite successful since that. Today we have around 220 corporate customers with very well-known names. Let's take a look at some of them. I mentioned automotive customers. We have various of the German car manufacturers, like for instance Daimler and BMW. But besides the automotive industry, we have customers in lots of different verticals, quite a few manufacturing and engineering customers. As you can see, there are very different companies in very different verticals with a different range of products. And some examples out of the automotive industry, for instance, are VMware, Juniper Networks, Hologic, Bosch, Schindler Elevators, Miele, MTU, Siemens, and many, many more. So I think it's a fair question to ask, what makes all these companies with a very different background to work with Congree? What are the typical pain points all these companies have? What do they share? What is their challenge? And I think one thing we can say is they all look for content quality. No question about that. But where does actually content quality start? What is an essential thing of content quality? It's definitely consistency. Consistency is a very important part of structured documentation. We are here at Adobe DITA World, so most of the attendees probably do structured documentation, or at least think about structured documentation. You look for the same structure, for the same information types, you look for topic-based creation, and so on. You all know how topic-oriented documentation with DITA works. Authors create topics. Topics end up in a knowledge base. At any time, topics are aggregated into a document on the basis of the metadata. And the final result is well-formed XML. Topics have been reused and all DITA criteria have been fulfilled. On the surface, everything looks good. But don't look at topics as a black box that can be combined in any way. It's also important to take the linguistic aspects into account, for instance, like consistency, coherence, and so on. Because consistent documents, consistent topics are great, but looking under the surface could mean to find out that not necessarily you will find the language itself actually being consistent. And that includes terminology, of course. So let's take a look at language and how language is understandable, and how it works has a lot to do with who creates this language. And probably you know these 80s TV series characters, or maybe some of them are from the 90s. So let's imagine these guys work in a content creation team, in your content creation team, and let's assign roles to them. If you know them, you certainly agree that they are completely different characters with very different personalities. You have a bit of a nerdy guy like Sheldon Cooper, who always tries to explain things in a very detailed way. We have the very pragmatic MacGyver. He's not spending too many words to explain things. He rather has a pragmatic focus on the actual results. We have Dr. House, very academic, however, with a bit of a probably cynical and ironical tonality. So try to imagine these guys are part of your content creation team. They all have different roles in your team, but they all contribute to your content creation. Of course, the content these gentlemen will create sounds different, even if they write about one and the same thing. On the sentence level, one and the same thing, for instance, described by Sheldon Cooper, will be very much described in detail. But if we take a look at MacGyver, he will not waste too many words. Probably he will straight get to the point of what needs to be said. And the same we have on the word level. Different terminology will be used, and by that, all the different wording goes into your publication channels. In times of single source publishing, this inconsistency goes to your CMS, from there into various publications all over your content. Not very good, probably. And this is a reason why many of the companies we work with have similar challenges, because it all starts with the content creation teams and how different the content creators are. And many companies and organizations that use our technology have challenges because of that, with consistency, understandability, and comprehensibility. And since they have lots of content creators and it's difficult for them to make all of these content creators write with one company specific language, they have a big challenge, but they have to make sure that their content will be understood and received by their content target groups. But very often, typical pain points are very often the same in many organizations. It's simply difficult to enforce a corporate language. You have subject matter experts great in what they do, but not necessarily in writing. So the content they write not always sounds perfect. And in addition, many companies we work with have problems with exploding translation costs due to missing consistency, because the more content you have, the more you have to translate. And of course, there are activities to avoid all of this by having a high volume of review. And yeah, of course, manual review also costs a lot of time and also includes a lot of costs. So what can be a help? Maybe a corporate style guide? Certainly, good start. Also, corporate terminology to define that could be a great start. It's definitely something which is on the right way. But how can you make sure, if you have a style guide, or if you have several style guides, and if you have corporate terminology which had been defined, how can you make sure that all content creators know how to apply this style guide in their daily work? How can they remember all the single rules that had been defined for style and grammar? And how can they make sure that they remember all the different terms that had been defined for allowed terminology and for deprecated terminology? How can all the content creators, which are in a team which is probably spread all over the globe, write on the same basis, and how is this something that can be enforced in daily content creation work? Maybe not much of a surprise, technology can help here, like the Congree Authoring Server. So let's take a look what the Congree Authoring Server actually is and what is behind. The Congree Authoring Server works on a client-server basis with three main components on the server side. And let's unlock what is behind the question marks here. So the first dimension we like to talk about is language check, and this checks for style and grammar to achieve a company-wide consistent style and grammar. And it means that already existing style guides can be taken over and brought into what we call a linguistic rule set, and then on this basis, content will be checked and content creators will receive a feedback if a style or a grammar rule had been violated, and if there is content which they created which is not aligned with their organization's style and grammar rules. So the second dimension I like to talk about is terminology that allows to define company-specific terminology, which is understood by your customers, users, and target groups. Also, the right branding, the right usage of brand names, product names, etc. can be included. And also here, many companies already have something very often. And the challenge is how to bring that into the content creation process. And this is also what content optimization technology does. Content optimization technology provides feedback to writers, to content creators, if, for instance, a wrong term had been used or wrong product name. So writers will see if there is something wrong, and then they have the chance to correct an error and to make sure that content they write is aligned with their company's branding guidelines and their company specific terminology. So how does this get now into the actual content creation? And as I mentioned, Congree is a client-server architecture, and we connect with various systems in the content creation and language technology landscape. And a very important part of our connectivity certainly is the connectivity on the client side by having a connectivity into various content creation environments, which means the environments where authors write content, like, for instance, the Adobe product family, like Adobe InDesign or Adobe FrameMaker. And we're quite proud, since recently we now also have an integration into Adobe Experience Manager guides. And during the following minutes, I'd like to guide you a bit through this integration and show you how you can check content and how you can optimize content within Adobe Experience Manager guides. Wait a second, please. So let me explain how the Congree integration into AEM works. And by clicking on a sentence in real time, the sentence will be checked immediately, and then you will see notifications in the sentence if a sentence is not corresponding with any of the defined style or grammar rules, or like here, where in the sentence, for instance, wrong terminology had been used. And by clicking on one of the notifications, you will see more details, and there are also proposals to replace, for instance, a wrong term, like in this case. So in this case, there is a deprecated term, which is defined as a term that is not allowed to be used. And there is a preferred term, which is the term that is defined to be used. And by clicking on the proposal, the forbidden term will be replaced by the preferred term. And if there are, by the way, any notifications you don't want to see, like in this example, informations about terms that are already known, which is something that not really helps the author. I mean, this is already fine. And if you like to focus on the pieces of information, the notifications that really help you to optimize the content, you can skip that and define that only the notifications will be shown that are relevant for you, and that unwanted notifications are not going to be shown. Okay, let's go to another one here, and that is another terminology notification. And as we can see here, there is a term that is admitted, and that is the term device. And admitted, that means it can be used in a certain context, but there is actually another term that is defined as the preferred term. This is instrument. That's the term that should be used, that is preferred. And that is the term we can now insert by clicking on it, and then it will be corrected if we want that. Okay. In addition to the notifications within the sentences, which we just had now, you also have the info box on the right side of the screen, and this shows the notifications as well. And you can use the info box to navigate through the notifications. And instead of checking a particular sentence by clicking on it, you can also check the entire document with a click if you want. So let's go to another notification. And so wait a second. We go to that one here, safety informations, which we can see here. So, and if we click on that, we can see there is a notification to review this sentence. And Congree informs me to review the noun phrase. And it says correct the noun to singular. So if I correct that, the content will be rechecked, and then it disappears, and now this sentence is fine. By the way, you can completely configure where the Congree info box appears. Could be on the right side, could be on the left side. You can also define for what the notifications will be shown. For instance, for errors on the current page, if you want that. And then I will see all errors on the current page within the info box, and I can scroll down the notifications. And if I click on a specific notification, my content also then will move to exactly the place where this notification is relevant, where this error occurs. So let's make an example here. Okay, and now we are exactly at the location of this error. Okay, if I enable, by the way, terminology research, I will also get a lot of additional information about each term that, for instance, can give me a definition of each term. I can see more information on each term. A lot of information that helps the authors to understand what the term is about, in what context it should be used. I can see synonyms and linked terms. So as an author, I see a lot of additional information which will make me understand what this term is about. Okay, another important question is, how is this terminology actually getting created? Of course, I can import existing terminology from already existing terminology sources as TBX or as a CSV from an Excel sheet. But also during the content creation process, new terminology gets created. And so Congree scans the content for new terminology and makes proposals if there are so-called term candidates. And if the authors feel this term indeed should be in the term database, then they can propose this term candidates, and whoever wears the head of terminology management within your organization finally can approve this term and add it to the terminology database. And once this is approved, then this is something which is available for the complete user community, and all authors can benefit from this additional term. So this is what I wanted to show in brief about the checking with Congree within Adobe AEM for style, grammar, and terminology. Let's move to another very interesting thing which we can do. But before that, a bit theory first. So we now saw the AEM integration. Hope you liked it. But probably you remember this slide, which we saw before. And there was one hidden area still with a question mark. And I like also to unlock this and to show you what is behind this one here. And this is what now makes content optimization complete. To recap, we have two dimensions. We have language check, we have language check for checking style and grammar, and we have terminology that checks for company-specific terminology and branding. And we optimize content. We help content creators to optimize their content. But there also is something which adds much more to content optimization, and that is, if I already have optimized, quality checked content, proven content, that's great. But what could make the picture now complete? What could be consequent now? And that is to reuse already quality checked content, to bring that back into the content creation process. And that's the third component which we have in the Congree Authoring Server. And this is what we call authoring memory, or also known as reuse. This provides already existing content for reuse on a sentence basis. And this is not only a great help for authors, they can type in a few keywords and then they get suggestions of complete already existing quality checked sentences. There also is a huge impact on several other aspects. And as we know, an important idea in DITA is reuse, and there are some levels of reuse in DITA. First, there is structural reuse, for instance, DITA maps and maps. Second level is topic reuse, and take a topic and use it somewhere else. That's the idea of topic reuse. And what does a topic consist of? Topics consist at least of sentences, but most likely of various different sentences. Most likely topics are not created by one and the same person. Most likely you have various writers, subject matter experts, developers, and so on that contribute to the number of topics which you have. So if on a sentence level within your topics, one and the same thing will be expressed in different ways, that won't help your audience to understand and to reach a better comprehensibility. But if you achieve consistency on a sentence level, that of course will help a lot in various aspects. And if now content on a sentence level that already had been used in a topic later will be reused to create content that will be used in another topic, that will help a lot to achieve consistency. So okay, that's what now makes content optimization complete. Let's recap. We have language check for checking style and grammar. We have terminology, and we have reuse. And so let's take a look at that into FrameMaker, and let's take another few minutes to show you what authoring memory can do. Wait a second, please. So let's take a look into the authoring memory component. If you activated that by clicking on a sentence, you will search for similar sentences, and you will see similar sentences with a calculation of their similarity. So to take over a sentence, just click on it and it will replace the former sentence. And like with the notifications we had for style and grammar, you can either click on a sentence and get suggestions, but you can also check the entire content for authoring memory suggestions. And then if this is done, you can navigate through the sentences to evaluate what could be a fit. So this will happen in a moment. We'll get the suggestions for the entire piece of content. Now it's there. Now we can navigate through the sentences. So since Congree works in real time, typing sentences will immediately provide suggestions for similar sentences out of the authoring memory repository. And possibly newly written sentences may have no matches yet. So, however, might be worth to add them to the sentence database, and we can do that by the so-called authoring memory candidates. But it can be that Congree will not allow that because the quality is not good enough to meet the quality requirements. And so Congree only provides sentences that have a sufficient quality. If this is the case, the sentence can be proposed, and if it's getting approved, then it will be added to the authoring memory database and will be available for all users. So that's what I wanted to show very much in brief about the Congree authoring memory functionality, a very useful function. So far, so good about content optimization in Adobe AEM, in the Adobe Experience Manager guides with Congree and the Congree Authoring Server. I hope you liked what you saw. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask your questions now. We are still here for a few minutes. I like to thank you for joining this session. Also, a big thanks to the entire Adobe team for the chance and honor to participate Adobe DITA World and to have this presentation. It was a big pleasure. If you have any questions in the future, of course, you can also send me an email. Please send an email to mannhardt@congree.com. And of course, you're also welcome to visit our website, congree.com. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day and hope to see you soon. Take care. Thank you.